Breaking news. This came through, and I think this is the shock that was heard around the world. I saw this and I said, uh-oh, everybody's going to panic and freak out now. Wait for it. Wait for it.
Good morning. Top of the hour. You are live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Erica Hill in New York, and we do begin this hour with breaking news. The New York Times reporting President Biden has told an ally, a close ally, he is considering whether to stay in the presidential race. This is the first indication Mr. Biden could end his re-election bid as the fallout from his disastrous debate performance continues to be felt.
So that was the news that was heard around the world, that apparently Joe Biden had revealed to a close ally that he was considering whether or not he wanted to stay in the race. Now, I'm sure, as you can imagine, corporate media and, of course, Democrat politicians went into panic mode when this was announced yesterday afternoon. There was another official that appeared on CNN to basically push back on that article from the New York Times, because that's who dropped the bombshell that they heard from a close Biden ally, that he said he's trying to weigh whether or not he wants to stay in the race. So it appeared to me that obviously that information was not supposed to be leaked. It's not something they wanted someone else to know. And of course, they already got someone on here to make an appearance and to debunk the article from the New York Times. You let me know who you believe. Listen to this.
Joining me now, Principal Deputy Biden Campaign Manager Quentin Fulks. Quentin, it's good to have you with us. I do want to get your take, first of all, on this new reporting from Katie Rogers that the president has told a key ally he knows he may not be able to salvage his candidacy if he can't convince the public in the coming days he is up for the job. What is being discussed in the campaign right now about this?
Well, first of all, good morning, Erica. Thank you for having me on the show. Look, that is false. There are a number of rumors floating out there. The president is in this race to win it. He is the Democratic nominee. And from our perspective, we're going to continue to do everything we can to make sure that we're building a campaign apparatus to reach voters.
So when you say that's false, the president has had zero conversations with anyone saying, I may not be able to continue, I may not be able to win this race.
That is correct. The president.
Let's pause here for a second. So does everybody see what happened here? The New York Times released that article saying that Biden was questioning whether or not he wanted to continue and stay in this race. So, of course, they bring in him to do the damage control and say, pump the brakes on that. That's not true. That didn't happen. Well, obviously, the New York Times spoke to someone. Someone either reached out to the New York Times or the New York Times reached out to them, and someone gave a statement. It's like, come on. Come on. So he's in to do damage control because apparently it's obvious to me they did not want that information to get out.
Has been having conversations with a number of Democratic leaders. I'm talking to them. I think obviously the president, in his own words, acknowledged a poor debate performance. But at the same time, I think what we're sensing from people is a sense of urgency and fear from Donald Trump. And I think that the conversations that the president has been having with Democrats across the country is one to reassure them that he is in this race, that he knows that he needs to reassure the American people, and that our campaign is going to continue to build and scale to win in November.
Yeah. So after that was announced, a number of people, a number of even corporate media now, corporate media outlets have decided to come forward and say, just put an end to this as quickly as possible. Now, I want to show you something that CNN revealed themselves, something they admitted to about Joe Biden's performance. And this is coming from Glenn Greenwald was the first to highlight this that I saw. CNN admits something unbelievably embarrassing. Many in media failed to report more on Biden's cognitive issues because they feared blowback. Listen to this. Now, this is coming from CNN right here. The White House press shop has also been very aggressive and fairly successful in mitigating coverage of concerns over the president's age. Look to the highlighted part here in the second paragraph. Some folks to conclude that these stories are too painful to report. Listen to this. Berating reporters who bring them reporting about age concerns, bemoaning that it's all anyone writes about, and often attacking pieces after they run, the reporter told CNN. I think that's left some folks to conclude that these stories are too painful to report or that they should pick their spots more. It is clear the age stories that have angered the White House and the liberal Twittersphere the most. So here is CNN openly admitting that they're liars. Openly admitting that they have been lying to you. Now, I've been telling you they've been lying to you, but now they're telling you that they have been lying to you. This also shows the hold that the State Department and the president's office has on corporate media. Now, media is supposed to be objective. You're not supposed to be afraid of the government or the establishment. You're supposed to be fighting about and writing about the government and the establishment. You're supposed to hold the government and the establishment accountable. But that doesn't happen because they're controlled. Couldn't have predicted this to happen, folks. Could not have predicted them to say, hey, we are liars. We've been running cover for the president. And then there is The Economist. And this one really hurts, I guess, right? This one is really low from The Economist. Shout out to Kit Clarenberg for revealing this. Kit Clarenberg said, oof, if you look at the cover of The Economist, no way to run a country. The Economist has a walker. They have a walker with the seal of the president of the United States. Like, this is, look, this is not even, I'm not even gonna put this on SNL level, okay? This is Key and Peele level. This is Chappelle Show level. They literally pulled out a walker and put the seal of the president of the United States on the front the cover of their magazine. No way to run a country. That's from The Economist. So there's that. They're not buying it. The media, corporate media, is split right now. There are some media networks that are defending Joe Biden and saying, no, he's in it to win it. He's staying in. And then there are others that are saying, no, this is done, son. So the media is not on board. They're not all on the same team. And then there was this hot mic moment here from Donald Trump as he was on the golf course. Here's Donald Trump admitting, yeah, I destroyed him. I destroyed Joe Biden. Listen to the hot mic moment.
What did I do with the debate the other night?
Oh, amazing.
Kick that old broken down pile of crap.
Yeah.
It's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race.
Is that right?
Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic.
It's so amazing.
It's just so fucking bad. So
I just can't imagine.
But can you imagine that guy dealing with Putin and the president of China, who's a fierce person? He's a fierce man. A very tough guy, and they see him. They probably they can't. But they just announced he's probably quitting.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just keep knocking.
So did you hear what he said at the end there? He said, and they just announced he's probably quitting. So yeah, the word has gone out. Let's go to part 2 here, Corey, for Type VNC. The word is out, folks. And it reminds me of something. I was thinking to myself, you know, if Joe Biden decides not to run for re-election, which many of us were sounding the alarm about this very early on. When he was running in 2020, I said, Joe Biden doesn't sound the same, doesn't seem the same. When he went on talking about corn pop and saying the kids need to listen to record players, it was very clear to me then there was something already starting to slip away from him. But yet, the DNC and corporate media continued to push him, knowing he wasn't even number 1 in the polls at that point, because that's who the donor class wanted. And that's how that works. So I thought to myself, has this happened before? And it has. We're going to go back to 1968. LBJ. Remember, LBJ decided not to run for Re-election. Look at this. I want to bring this back up to your attention. On March 31st, Johnson spoke to the nation on steps to limit the war in Vietnam. He then announced an immediate unilateral halt to the bombing of North Vietnam and announced his intention to seek out peace talks anywhere at any time. At the close of his speech, he announced, "I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." Now, this is during the Vietnam War. We don't have a war in Vietnam right now, but we do have Israel's assault on Gaza. And both presidents at that time were not seen in a favorable light. LBJ was not seen in a favorable light during the war in Vietnam. Joe Biden is not seen in a favorable light right now during Israel's assault in Gaza. LBJ decided not to accept the nomination. This is what some people mean when they say that Gaza is Biden's Vietnam. We can argue it's not just that. We can realize it's not just Gaza. There are other things economically as well. I want to show you something else about LBJ. Let's go down to here, the very bottom, right about here. Despite recommendations in August from Harriman, Vance, Clifford, and Bundy to halt bombing as an incentive for Hanoi to engage in substantive peace talks, Johnson refused. In October, when the parties came close to an agreement on a bombing halt, Republican presidential nominee Richard Nixon intervened with the South Vietnamese, making promises of better terms to delay a settlement until after the election. After the election, Johnson's primary focus on Vietnam was to get Saigon to join the Paris peace talks. Only after Nixon added his urging did they do so. Even then, they argued about procedural matters until after Nixon took office. And this is something I've been pointing to as well, because I really believe, and I polled you guys about this, do you think that this conflict with Israel and Gaza will be over before November, before Election Day? And I really believe that it has been the Biden strategy to try to drag this out until the election. Because I think what they're going to try to say, they're going to try to tell you, well, who do you want to step in at this point in time? You know, we're in peace talks right now. Do you really want to take me out and put Trump in instead? That's something he can use to kind of hold over people's head. Kind of reminds me of George Bush as well, George W. Bush. So there is a little bit of a similarity too, because I didn't know this before, but I was reading about this yesterday. Did you know that LBJ, apparently he had some type of study done when he was still alive? He had a study done that basically predicted that he was going to die when he turned 64 years old. That was another reason why he did not want to run for re-election. He had health problems. Joe Biden is also experiencing health problems. So it makes me wonder, could we possibly see the same thing? Now, this is something else that's interesting as well. I want to show you this clip because so many people are voicing their opinion about this. And they're talking about donors here. Let me bring this one up because the donors are important. We can't forget about that. Hollywood Democratic mega donor Ari Emanuel torches President Joe Biden. So one of the things here, I talked to a bunch of big donors and they're moving all their money to the Congress and the Senate. So this is a big red flag when the donors start to pull out. Listen to this.
All right. Democrats are jumping out of the window. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm pissed off at the founding fathers. They had the start date of 35. They just didn't give us the end date. And And, well, everybody died, so they didn't have to give the end date. I don't want to deal with Donald Trump and what he said was true. It's a given, certain things. I'm not going to talk about CNN. Here's what Biden did. He said he was going to run for one term, and he's doing it to restore democracy. He now runs for a second term. First bit of malarkey, as he would say. Then he says that this is for it's a quintessential thought about saving democracy, and it's so important, etc. His cohorts have told us that he's healthy for over a year. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal. And I had a father who died at 92, but at 81, I took away his car. And it's a very simple test for me. If you were driving from, anyway they understand, from downtown Beverly Hills to Malibu, would you want Biden to do it at night? Would you want Trump to do it at night? Or would you want neither? If the answer is neither, you cannot have them running a $27 trillion company called.
Listen to what he just said. Notice the places that he mentioned, Beverly Hills to Malibu. So that right there shows you the class difference, right? If you're driving from Beverly Hills to Malibu, that lets you know where this guy stands.
The United States.
Okay.
And then we sat in a situation where he went to France for the 80th anniversary and talked about the sacrifice that those soldiers made for us. So he has said, and his cohorts have said, he's the only one that has defeated Trump. It does seem like Donald Trump said, I'm the only one, I alone can make all these problems go away. And now Biden is saying, I'm the only one that can beat Trump. Seems like it's pretty similar here. And we have a great bench in the Democratic Party. And so we're looking at a man who's saying the other guy's a liar, and he's telling us malarkey. His people are telling us malarkey. But we're in a very bad problem. He is not the candidate anymore. I mean, if you all remember, this is a legal issue now. He was going to get kicked off the ballot in Ohio. They elected him the candidate. So you no longer can remove him. In 3 swing states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, there's only one Democratic Congress, Michigan. They have to vote to remove him. I don't believe the Republican Party in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin are going to do that. Okay, and if they do, it's then Kamala Harris. We don't have. This is legal, so lawyers have to look at this, and everybody says, "Well, get rid of him," and brokered convention. No. Now, maybe the delegate. There's some question whether the delegates can do something, and I promised myself I wasn't going to swear. So we're in this is a pickle. The lifeblood to, and I have a brother who's a politician. He's an ambassador, as it said.
His brother is Rahm Emanuel. That's right. Thank you for shouting that out, Oz. His brother is Rahm Emanuel, the guy who closed all those schools in Chicago.
The lifeblood to a campaign in politics, the lifeblood is money. And maybe the only way this gets, with smart lawyers looking at it, is if the money starts drying up. And I'm assuming all of you've gotten a lot of calls. I've gotten a lot of calls. We've all sat there. It was.
Well, I was going to say, what happens now?
But if this is, as Biden says, the fight for our democracy, and he talks about the soldiers, man, he gave us a bunch of malarkey, and I'm really pissed.
Right.
And we all should be really pissed.
Right.
And he actually believed him. That's the thing. He believed him. Again, that's Rahm Emanuel's brother. So he's not responsible for the actions of his brother. But what he lets you know right then and there is that, hello, the money controls all of it. The money controls all of it, folks. So he's correct about that. Now you have Van Jones and the rest of some of the CNN cronies here also freaking out and melting down. They don't know what to do because this is a public embarrassment. It's not just an embarrassment for the Democratic Party. It's also an embarrassment for corporate media because you guys have openly admitted that you've been lying and hiding this from the American people. However, what's really interesting, though, those of us who have been paying attention, we know Joe Biden wasn't with it. We knew Joe Biden was having problems. We knew he was experiencing decline. We knew that for those of us who are paying attention. Problem is, most Americans have not been paying attention to politics until it gets closer to the election. So for most Americans, they're like, whoa, what the hell is happening to Joe Biden? Whoa, listen to this.
Look, I'm just going to be honest. I mean, everybody comes on the air and says all this great stuff, but behind the scenes, it's full-scale panic. People are passing around legal memos, PDFs are flying back and forth on WhatsApp, trying to figure out what are the options, how can you replace Biden, how do you get him to do it in a way where he feels respected as he should be respected, who should Kamala Harris's vice president be? The conversation on air and the conversation off air are completely different. And so it's the same thing you saw with the Trump situation, where people would come on air and defend Trump, and then you talk to people and we got a crazy candidate. We don't have a crazy candidate. We have a great candidate. We have a beautiful man. We have someone who loves this country. We have someone who has given his all, I mean his all to the last drop for this country, but he may not be able to get across the finish line. And a mature party has to take that into account, and that is what's happening. And so, look, I understand people want to, defend him and protect him and give him their space and the dignity to make his own choice. But there is a big conversation happening right now about how this happens, not whether.
I mean, they just look foolish. You all just look really foolish, but you were hiding this from people for quite some time. I still remember when Jamal Bowman said during an event that the squad had in DC, Colin from Indie News Network recorded that event. Jamal Bowman said, and these were his exact words, we have to drag this guy across the finish line. He said that about Joe Biden, that they had to drag him across the finish line. That right there should have told people what was up. They knew he was falling apart. They knew it. Then on top of that, we have to face a reality here, folks. And that reality is that now corporate media pundits are pointing towards Kamala Harris. And this is the part that a lot of people are not going to like to hear, but this is the reality. Kamala Harris is the vice president. Turns out who you select for vice president actually matters. Imagine that. So now they are trying to warm the public up to the possibility of Kamala Harris taking that spot. And this is what I warned people about. People are like, why are you saying bad things about Kamala Harris? She's not the president. Because I knew her time was coming. She's horrible on foreign policy. She's horrible during interviews. Do you really want Kamala Harris running the country? So think about this, folks. When you are voting in November, if you think you're voting for Joe Biden, you're actually voting for Kamala Harris. And that's if Biden even makes it that far. Listen to this.
Against the possibility that Harris will step in to take President Biden's spot if Biden were to end his campaign. To that end, new Reuters Ipsos polling shows that in a hypothetical matchup against Trump, Harris outperforms 4 other potential Democratic candidates, losing to Trump by just 1 percentage point.
But she still loses to Trump. So this is the point that I was trying to make. All of these people lose to Donald Trump. Now, she has 1 percentage point. I would argue, I don't even think it would be that close. I don't even think it would be that close between Donald Trump and Kamala. I think it would be worse, especially once people see Kamala Harris in these debates. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard knocked her out with 1 punch. 1 punch. The cackle could come back.
That is perhaps why at least one Democrat is on the record saying Kamala Harris should be the Democratic nominee for president in 2024. Joining me now is that Democrat, Tim Ryan, former congressman from Ohio. Tim, it is good to see you this evening. Thanks for being here tonight. Let's just get right to your argument. Why Kamala Harris?
Well, we need a generational change. I mean, there's no question about that. I think you look at what they call the double haters. They don't want Biden. They don't want Trump. I think it's really important that we give them an alternative. So there'd be the huge generational change. You look at the practical politics of the situation. Look where we're bleeding out. We're soft with a lot of the minority communities, and we're bleeding out young people. And I think Kamala could come in instantaneously, juice our base, pull in young people. I've been getting calls from Ohio that want, working class people. They want Biden to step down, and they're telling me they'd be excited for a Kamala Harris run. So I think she checks a lot of these boxes. And you take the choice issue just real quick. I think there's so much at stake for women. For her to be able to prosecute that issue for us in a debate against Donald Trump, I think that, you add all that together, and I think we're back in the game and we could make a good run at this thing.
Oh boy, here it comes. You knew it was coming, right? She's a woman, so women would vote for her. That didn't work out too well for Elizabeth Warren. I remember people thinking that too. Like, all these women are going to come out and support Elizabeth Warren. No, it turns out people actually do care sometimes about policy. So you get what he's saying? We're weak in the minority community. You're weak in some minority communities. But again, whose fault is that? That's the Democratic Party's fault. They let it get to this point. They let it get to that point.
Do you think it's a decidedly different moment than it was in 2020 when she did throw her hat in the ring for the presidential nomination and was out before Iowa?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, you're better at your job 3.5 years later. Most Americans who do something for 3.5 years, especially at a very high level, you get better, you grow, you become seasoned. She's already has a lot of raw talent and ability and charisma. And presidential campaigns are pretty tough, so that's a heck of a standard. But I think it culminated for me in my mind, Alex, to really start thinking about this, was how she handled herself on debate night. Absolute star. I mean, I followed her. I was so enamored. I followed her across all the cable stations as she was doing her interviews, and she was masterful. She
was masterful. This is the same woman again. Does he not remember that how Tulsi Gabbard pulled up her record during the debate, and that after that Kamala was through? Does he not remember this? Do they want this to happen again, for people to bring up her, talk about how she refused to prosecute Steve Mnuchin? I think it's how you say his last name. She refused to prosecute him because he was her friend and because he donated money to her. The way that she went after, single family homes in California. The way that she went after people for marijuana. Like, all it takes is for someone to bring up her record again. This is the same woman. She couldn't get a delegate in her own state. She couldn't get a delegate in California. I don't think that Kamala would be this masterful, candidate that they think that she would be. Let's continue a little bit more.
I think that's the culmination of 3.5 years. So to me, it's like, what are we waiting for? We have a very good candidate here. Let's help her grow into the campaign. I think it would be a great move for Biden to kind of set up somebody like Kamala Harris as the crowning jewel of what is this really significant and well done presidency.
Let me tell you something. If Kamala Harris is the nominee, you guys, you don't think I'm joking. People are going to come out heavily and support Donald Trump. Mark my words. It's just a reality. People know that Kamala's not ready. Do you trust Kamala Harris to lead foreign policy? Don't we have 2 foreign conflicts right now? Do you trust Kamala Harris to be in charge of that? Because I sure as hell don't.
In the last 72 hours or the last 5 days, There have been a lot of names mentioned, and what's been so odd about this is only in the last 12 to 24 has Kamala Harris's name really popped up as potentially a leading contender, if, with the giant caveat that Biden has not dropped out, and only if he does drop out would she go obviously to the top of the ticket. I wonder, what that signals. The Wall Street Journal sort of takes the opposite opinion from yours. They're saying that Biden is effectively trying to scare Democrats that Harris is the only alternative if he drops out. The reason we're seeing this sort of flurry of prognostication about Harris's viability is because the Biden campaign is floating that as a disincentive. Do you think that that's tortured logic? I mean, what's your response to that idea?
I don't know, honestly. I'm not understanding a lot of what's coming out of the White House in the last 72 hours. I don't agree with it. I think the way they've handled this has been tremendously unhelpful to just voters like me, former members of Congress and current members of Congress. So I don't know exactly what the machinations going on inside the White House are. I just hope they will take a very, very close look, maybe even have the president watch the debate again, really see what's happening. I mean, I'm here in Ohio. Like, the average people are still talking about what happened on the debate night on Thursday. We're not going to shift that narrative, Alex. It's just, we've got to come to reality. We've got to be, one of the things people don't like about Democrats, we're not decisive. We don't act with conviction enough. They don't see us as strong. This is an opportunity for us to shift all of those kind of narratives that the Republicans have pinned on us as a party. And I think the opportunity now is to do the right thing. Let's quit dilly-dallying around here. We got a race to win. You saw the Chevron decision. We saw the immunity decision. The Supreme Court, flipped the Constitution and turned it upside down. I mean,
the problem that you run into with the Democratic Party, which I've noticed, is that they're often reactive instead of proactive. And this is a perfect example of what you see happening right now. So let's all remember, there were candidates running in a primary against Joe Biden. The DNC shut it down. Corporate media shut it down and said, no, Joe Biden is the sitting president, so he is going to be the nominee. There were people running. Dean Phillips was correct when he told people, I'm running because Biden is too old. At least he was blunt about it. Dean Phillips was blunt and open and honest about it and said, I'm running because Biden is too old. It's just flat out, right? Now, I didn't agree with all of his platform. I don't think he should have been running through the Democratic Party. Same thing with Marianne. I said, well, I don't know why you're trying to run through the Democratic Party. It's a waste of time, which I see now. Apparently, she has thrown her hat back in the race. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. But the reality is, the Democratic Party, you can't get upset now because there were people running in a primary against Joe Biden, and you refused to acknowledge their existence as much as possible. You said there would not be debates. Had there been debates, you probably wouldn't be sitting with this situation right now. But so when Tim Ryan says that people are still talking about that debate, I believe it because people are still talking about it here in Massachusetts, too. It's not unique to Ohio. People are going to be talking about it for quite a while. It's bad. It's bad, fam. But it's also July. And it may be a little too late for someone like Kamala to be pushed towards the people. Mehdi Hasan disagrees. Mehdi Hasan believes that Kamala is the one. Check out Mehdi Hasan here on News Nation discussing this.
Mehdi Hasan is the editor-in-chief and founder of news platform Zeteo, okay? Smart guy, very good analyst and arguer, and you're about to see that. So,
thank you.
Mehdi Hasan, let you start. The governors come out and say, we're good with Joe. Why isn't that the end of the conversation?
Thanks for having me, Chris. Just want to correct something from your very interesting, excellent monologue in many ways. I'm not a Democrat, right? I'm a progressive. I'm of the left. I'm not a member of the Democratic Party. I'm not approaching this as a Democrat. Well, I am actually as a small d Democrat.
I was about to say, you know damn well you are a Democrat. And don't miss me with the small d. You are a Democrat. You may not agree with more of the establishment Democrats. You might be more of like a progressive Democrat, but you are a Democrat. You know, it's like being sort of pregnant.
The reason I have a skin in this game, why I care about this fight, is because I care about the future of American democracy. As you say, we're about to celebrate the 4th of July, independence, American history. I believe all of that is at stake come November. And the only thing I care about is stopping the proto-fascist candidate that the GOP are putting up once again. And when I look at the polls, when I look at the debate last week, when I look at the numbers, it just is very clear that Joe Biden is in a very bad place, as you laid out in the introduction. No president has ever been this unpopular at this stage in the cycle, so close to Election Day. Thursday night was a car crash of a debate. That's when I came out and said he should step aside. I've never said that before. I said it Thursday night because it was just ridiculous what we saw on Thursday night. And because I see no way back for Joe Biden. One thing I've been waiting for the last few days is for a plan. What is the plan that Joe Biden has to recover all the voters he's losing by the day? He's down 6 points in the New York Times poll today among likely voters, 8 points, amongst registered voters. In fact, the most crucial stat, Chris, in that poll is that the number of Republican voters who want Biden to stay on as the nominee has gone up, not down, since last week, because the Republicans know he's eminently beatable. So I want to hear what the plan is. I don't think there's a plan. They briefed to Axios, Team Biden, he's going to give a great convention speech. We may get an interest rate cut, and that's going to deliver victory. That's BS. They're in a very bad place. If they switch now to Kamala Harris, they have some chance of recovering ground, having a younger, more effective prosecutor of the case, someone who can maybe turn the page on Gaza, and someone who could actually rhetorically beat up Trump at the next debate if there is another debate.
So a couple of things I want to comment on here where he said, let's start with the comment that he made about democracy. You're not going to win votes by talking about we need democracy. We got to protect democracy. The average person that's just trying to figure out how they're going to put food on the table after the Biden administration cut SNAP benefits, the average person that's trying to figure out how they're going to pay for their healthcare expenses that were once a part of Medicaid, that got kicked off Medicaid from Joe Biden, they're not thinking about democracy. You're not going to win over. And particularly, it looks like in this election that the Biden administration will need to win over non-voters to actually beat Donald Trump if things continue the way that they are. And you're not going to win over working class people, and working poor by saying we need to protect democracy. The way that you're going to win over those people is by helping them, is by the economic bread and butter issues, which the Democratic Party is failing on. You cannot admit, as much as they want to talk about what Joe Biden has done, they don't want to talk about some of the things that Joe Biden removed. They don't want to talk about the fact that he cut Medicaid. They don't want to talk about the fact that he kicked people off of unemployment. They don't want to tell you that he reduced SNAP benefits for people. And if you talk to people that heavily relied on those programs, yes, they are being hit. They are hurt. Meanwhile, they're seeing our government every other week or so, they're sending another billion to Ukraine. They're sending money to Israel. They're sending money everywhere except for the people here in the United States. And that is a problem. So you are not going to win over the working poor and working class people and poor people over we need to protect our democracy. People have to understand that. They don't understand that. These people live in a bubble. There's a class divide here. These people live in a bubble. They're going to dinner with white tablecloths and they're mingling in circles that we would never, ever get to see. We would never talk to any of these people. They're in these elite circles. They don't know what it's like to struggle. Most of them don't. Most of the people in corporate media came from some type of privilege, or they came from an elite academic institution, or someone in their family was a part of corporate media. Chris Cuomo did not have to struggle growing up. He comes from a political family. Think about all these people. Anderson Cooper's a freaking Vanderbilt. We can go on. They never figured out how to deliver a message to the people. They never figured out how to do that because they don't know what the people need. And if you've never been working class, or you're not poor, or you don't know what it's like to struggle in this country, to work 2 jobs or to work 3 jobs, you're not going to get it. And the college elite talking points that you make on these news networks is not going to resonate with poor folks. It's that simple. This is where I think the Democratic Party went wrong. The reason why Trump was able to win in 2016 is because he went and he spoke to those people. And don't get me wrong, he's a billionaire. He's still wealthy too. He didn't keep a lot of his promises because he still looked out for his rich buddies in the end with the wealth tax. But he knew what to say to those people. And so for me, it's very frustrating because I feel like they never have learned this lesson. They're still stuck. There's another one here via Anderson Cooper. Another panel CNN. The first one I showed you was Van Jones. This is another person speaking here where it said waves are crashing into this shore. Listen to this. Senior Biden admin official calls erosion of Dem support.
So there's not going to be chaos at the convention. If Biden doesn't run, and this is totally his decision, it's going to be Harris. And that's just the way it is. Turns out she polls better than everybody else anyway, so it's just as well. But there's not going to be a big fight at the convention. There will be a few people like Dean Phillips who put his name in and got what he deserved. But it's going to be cooked. Harris, there's some financial reasons for this. Harris is a signatory to the Biden-Harris campaign, so the money can go to her. It can't willy-nilly go to whoever else might end up. But there's just not going to be a bloodbath. There's not enough time for there to be a bloodbath. There isn't a single candidate other than Harris who can muster the organizational ability to run a presidential campaign, because she's already got that ability because she's been running this campaign or running in this campaign for months.
A lot of Black people don't like Kamala Harris. And this is another thing that they may not realize, or they do, but of course, they don't want to admit that. A lot of Black people are not fond of Kamala Harris. You can look at her polls when she ran in 2020, and you can see how she polled with African-American voters. So what does that tell you about Kamala? Now, of course, she was approached and she was questioned whether or not she is ready to step into the ring. Listen to this. Approached on the street and called out.
And speaking about stakes, you just came out of a fundraiser. We know that many in your party have expressed concerns about President Biden's health. Just this morning, Congressman Doggett said that he's calling on President Biden to withdraw from the race, given that there's too much at stake to risk a Trump victory. What's your response to this?
Look, Joe Biden is our nominee. We beat Trump once, and we're going to beat him again, period.
Are you ready to lead the country if necessary?
I am proud to be Joe Biden's running mate. Thank you.
So she said she's proud to be Joe Biden's running mate, not ready to answer that question there. And what makes things even crazy, you guys, is that, of course, Karine Jean-Pierre, she is trying to pretend like none of this is happening. She's coming up for all kinds of excuses for Joe Biden's performance. Still.
There's no question that international travel can be rigorous. I think the confusion is that he's still suffering from the effects of that nearly 2 weeks later. So can you articulate a little bit about, like, do you guys usually have accommodations for him after he does a trip, that he's going to have jet lag for that long a period of time?
So can you, when you say 2 weeks later, what do you mean?
Well, the debate, he arrives back in the United States 12 or 13 days before the debate. So his explanation for a poor debate performance is jet lag.
So what I want to say is it's the jet lag and also the cold, right? It is the two things and that occurred. And you all heard it in his voice when he did the debate, right? And it is not even something that we shared ahead of time. You heard it in his voice and we confirmed it. And I think that's important to note as well. Like, it is the jet lag and the cold.
3 weeks later, jet lag and the cold. So she's still trying to run cover for Joe Biden. Interestingly enough, Karine Jean-Pierre has a history of working with corrupt politicians. She worked with Anthony Weiner, worked for Anthony Weiner. Do you guys know that? Yeah. She has a history of this. She wrote an article about it. How to bounce back when we're in this type of situation. She wrote an article about it. So this is something that she's used to doing. lying and protecting. Oh my God, the most corrupt. It's a mess. I don't know what you guys feel about the poll, but if you haven't had a chance to answer that, go ahead and answer that poll. Do you think that Joe Biden is going to step down before November? And I'll tell you one thing, whether they want Kamala or someone else, whatever's, the reality is the longer they drag this out, the worse it is going to be. But I think if I were sitting at home and I didn't know, if I was a diehard Democrat voter and I was sitting at home, for those people, I'm going to tell you this. When you are voting for Joe Biden in November, you're actually voting for Kamala Harris, because the reality is I don't see Joe Biden making it through another 4 years as president of the United States. His health is continuing to decline. So it's only a matter of time before he's going to have to walk away. So think about that when you vote in November, because that's really who you're going to be voting for.